Welcome to What No One Knows, the podcast that tells the secret behind the published books, hosted by Lisa Marie Garcia, the Chief Operating Officer of Now Publishing, a full-service book publishing and author PR firm. Through the years in the publishing industry, we've heard the statement over and over, "This is what no one knows," when we interview would-be authors wishing to tell their story. This is what this podcast is all about. And now to our podcast and our host, Lisa Marie Garcia.
Hello. Thank you again for joining us on a Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. for our podcast, the now produced What No One Knows. So today we have a guest that is named Sarina Fazan. She is a 4-time Emmy Award winning television anchor and reporter with over 25 years of industry experience. Her greatest passion is sharing people's stories and highlighting the best in the community. Sounds familiar to us on our team because that's one of the fun things about being in publishing. And as the owner of Sarina Fazan Media, she is using her proven expertise as a storyteller to help businesses and individuals succeed in their dreams. She's also a motivational speaker, and she served as Master of Ceremonies for many organizations throughout the Tampa Bay area. Sarina Fazan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. What an honor and a privilege. It's so wonderful to be here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I want to disclose that you also were so generous with your time. A couple months back, we had you be our keynote speaker for something that we called Media Training 101, right?
Yes, it was so much fun. It was really great to meet all your authors, a lot of your authors. I know you have many more.
Yeah, it was a great, well, thank you again. And they really have remarked that it was very helpful. And you do provide that to people that could use some media training, and anyone that hasn't had media training, they can use it, would be what I would say, because it's not something that comes natural. I mean, can you maybe share one of your first gigs, so to speak, or one of the first times you were on air, and some of those things that maybe were cringeworthy, but it's long ago. Just for fun.
It is so funny that you mentioned that, though, because I think with any profession, right, whether it's accounting, whether it's teaching, you're so used to being in your zone, and you don't realize, when I say you, I mean all of us, we don't realize that while it might be second nature to us, it's not second nature to the person we're speaking with. So I often forget, to answer your question, for me, being on television, it's always been such a natural thing, but I'm talking to a camera, I'm not sitting there speaking in front of an entire crowd. That's something I did have to get used to. Like with me, when I would, on air or doing stories, and I would just see, it would be me and my camera person, me and my photographer. But I tell you, the first time that I don't know if there was necessarily a television moment. There is one funny story, though. I'm sure there's many funny stories, but this is the first story that comes to mind. When I first started my career, I was a morning anchor in the Quad Cities. Quad Cities are on the border of Iowa and Illinois, Moline, Davenport, Bettendorf, and Rock Island. And I was anchoring, again, the morning show. And here I am. I was actually solo anchoring because my co-anchor happened to be off that day. And, it's market 86, which is not too small of a market, but not a huge market. So we couldn't get anybody in the last minute. Anyway, I'm anchoring, talking about a very important news story, and my earring falls off. It goes flying out of my ear. And for me, it was one of those moments that I really didn't know what to do. Like, I just kept on going. And when I say just an earring fell off, it wasn't, just a small ping. I still to this day do not know how it flew out of my ear. But
it propelled through the air.
It propelled, yes. And so afterwards, of course, this is like 6 o'clock in the morning when I'm making the morning show, and I just pretended like it didn't happen. So I was so concerned what my news director would say when he came in, because I didn't know, if I handled it right, if I should have said something. I mean, what should I have done? And so he came in and he said, well, that was quite eventful this morning, because of course it's my first anchor job, right? So I stumbled, through the story because I was so distracted by the earring. And And he said to me, he said, sometimes, he said, the next time something like that happens, and it will, he said, acknowledge it. Don't ignore it. And I always remember that because he said, I said, but it was a serious story. And he said, it doesn't matter. He said, because you were distracted. He said, everybody's going to be distracted. He said, so the next time, acknowledge. And I carry that lesson with me. And to this day, when I was talking to your group, in fact, I said, nowadays we do more live than we've ever done before because we have so many capabilities through, the phone. So if you're doing a Facebook Live and you're out of your element and you're nervous and you're stumbling around or you trip over something, acknowledge it because that's life and that's reality. But it all comes full circle back to when I was 22, 23 years old and that earring fell off in the middle of a newscast.
And so 22. So have you always been, I was going to ask you this, I was curious about this. Have you always been in media then? Has this been your industry that you stayed in?
Yes.
Wow.
It's the only industry. Yes. I mean, of course I waitressed and I bartended all through college and then, a year and a half after college trying to break into the industry. But as far as my professional industry, not that that's not a professional industry, but as far as a career, yes, media has been my industry.
That's fantastic. That's very rare too. It used to be in the old days, just kidding. But, it was the past, it was the company store, right? Or you work for a corporation until you retire. That's going away in our generation. But then this idea in our generation and then in the millennial generation of, you don't have just one job in one industry. You have 5 different jobs, you have all these side hustles, and they're all in different industries sometimes. So that's pretty cool that you've, been able to definitely weather the changes and the companies and the roles and the managers and all of that. That says a lot for being flexible and being determined. So
well, thank you.
Cool.
I've always, so English is not my first language. It's my 5th language. And I've always wanted to be a journalist, always, since I was 3 years old. I moved to this country from India, and I learned how to speak English by watching Walter Cronkite and Barbara Walters, and suffered through a horrible speech impediment for years. I was in speech therapy, serious speech therapy for years.
That's a very little known fact for sure. And again, it's something like we had an author on one of our podcasts that was talking about her fear of speaking. And she's actually a TEDx person now, but from where she started. So the fact that, you actually needed speech therapy to do what you loved. And you said a lot of it, it's, it really is that discipline that comes from being determined. And, people every day make a, declaration of determination, but where is it the next week and the next week? And when they're tired and when they're influenced, it kind of, will, sometimes go away. So I love to talk to people and, read about people and get to know people that have that discipline that is behind your determination. So awesome.
It's so true. When I was working in New Orleans, no, actually it was in Tampa. It was actually here. It wasn't even in New Orleans. It was here. Peter Jennings, rest his soul, was always one of my, big mentors. And I interviewed him when he came here to Tampa. This was years and years ago. And as we all know, sadly, he passed away. But speaking of determination, he said to me in an interview, he said, especially in, our business, the media business has changed so much. So it's not the same as it used to be. But he said, it's not necessarily the most talented people that broke into media. He said it is the people who are the most determined and the most persistent in following their dream. And that was one of those, another moment, that always stuck with me. And I think, wouldn't you agree you could carry that to any profession?
Absolutely. I mean, persistence, resilience,
Hmm.
those words are not accidents when they come to someone's character. If someone doesn't have that trait, you would never just, flippantly say, oh, that person is so resilient. That person is so, no, I mean, they earned those words the hard way. And I agree. As now publishing is, I would call it a startup. And in March of 2021, I'm going to stop that completely because we'll be 5 years old. And so these last, under 5 years have really been a good test in being persistent and determined and knowing what the end's going to be a couple of years ago, right? A couple of
Right.
years, and I know, and you just recently moved back to Florida, right? How long has it been that you've been here?
Well, I've actually been here now for 20 years.
Okay, now why did I think you moved out and then came or went out of state?
That I'm not sure of.
I'm
I was
sorry.
born, no, that's fine. I was born in India. I grew
Yeah.
up in Washington State, went to college in Chicago. Then my first job was in Iowa. Then I worked in Louisiana, in New Orleans. And then I moved here about 20 years ago. And I've
Okay.
been here the whole time.
Well,
And I
see,
love it
20
here.
years,
And I love
right,
it here.
right. What's not to love about it, right?
Yeah,
So
I
20
love it.
years is a couple of years in my mind. No, just kidding. But
That's
yeah,
right. I
no,
mean,
I was thinking about,
yeah, no,
well,
time just flies. It might be because I've been doing a lot of national projects lately too,
yeah.
but they come to me. Um, I
Yeah,
love
and
to
I'd
travel.
love you to talk about maybe your favorite one. I did also want to, I don't want to, just kind of drop, blow by the 4-time Emmy Award. I
Oh,
would love you to tell a story of, one of the awards one of the Emmys that you won and just share with us because it's not often that I get to talk to an Emmy Award winning television anchor. But yeah, would you share something fun about your career with
you
us that
know,
way?
this I, I will. I guess fun is not this. It's like I'm even getting tongue tied talking about it because one of the Emmy that I am the most proud of is helping the survivor of the Bloomingdale attack. I don't know if you remember that. She was a high school senior. She had just turned 18. It was 2 days after her birthday. She was dropping off a book at the Bloomingdale library, and she was attacked by a 16-year-old at the time who brutally sexually assaulted her. And to this day, she cannot walk, talk, eat on her own. But her mother just wrote a book. Speaking of books, she just wrote a book. The book actually is being released today. It's
Hmm.
Queena, the Life She Once Knew. And the reason why I won an Emmy for that story was because I extended health care for this young woman. Healthcare was denying her coverage. So I went to the governor, who was Charlie Crist at the time. I went to U.S. Senator Bill Nelson, and we changed policies, and her health care was extended. Her mom was a guest on my podcast, On the Record with Sarina Fazan, and her mom and told me the day of the podcast and on air that I was actually in the book. And as you can imagine, I started to tear up. And Queena's sister Anna was also here, who's now pregnant with her first child. But if you could only imagine what this family has gone through, and now to actually release a book on that journey,
Right.
fundraisers for Queena still continue to this day. And yeah, it's a story that has stuck with me. In fact, all of them really have. So oftentimes people say with journalists, um, do you forget the story? You do so many stories. No, I mean, I remember there are so many stories that I was so close to that I think about every single day. And that young Queena being one of those stories. She's 30 years old now, too. So
So tell us again the name of the title of the book. It's Queen of the
so it's Queen. I have to let's see. I have to get the exact title because they just sent me the book and they talked about the book on the podcast. Here, I can pull that up right now for you.
is it
It's the life
okay, true story of the life
it's the
she
life
once
she once
knew.
knew. Yes, it's
Okay, so and it's on Amazon right now. The life
yeah.
she once knew, the incredible true story of Queena. Oh my goodness. I how how wonderful that what you did to help her, and how important, how clearly you were chosen to be in that place and that time to meet her and to help her family. And I love that they were